Hello and welcome to another Daily Muppet. In today's video, I want to talk about last week's live transfer stream. I wanted to do a bit of a summary on that, go over a few of the finer points. I want to talk about the head coaching position at United, what that means, as some more stories have come out about that. Talked about the pursuit of the director, injuries, and a few more things that we'll try to get to while my voice holds up for this video today, okay? So let's get into it. Okay, so let's talk about the summer signings and the video from last week. So last week on the live stream, I went through all of the different names, kind of put them into a bit of a stoplight, right? Was kind of the idea. I was trying to do just in the style of Dan Ashworth, do like make it like the green, red, yellow thing in terms of signings and rank them across the board for different positions. Now, this is not like shouldn't be taken as all information, okay? This is this summary here I've put together that is based on my observation of the information that I went into detail on during that live stream and explained with each player why I see it as being more likely, less likely. It doesn't mean we're going to sign all these players. It doesn't mean we're going to get all these players in. It doesn't mean any of that. It's just a very early look how I wanted to do things rather than perhaps, the whole flow chart from before. Though I think I'll probably do something similar to that as well later on. But we'll start at the back. Gerard Brainthwaite, we'll talk more about him specifically in a minute. But yeah, starting at the back, at center back, Gerard Brainthwaite, with a backup of Gonzalo Inacio. These are two left-footed center backs. On the right side, Todibo. And it's interesting that today, Fabrizio Romano put out something that, obviously United's still interested. And it looks like he's going to cost $40 million this summer. Very, very good player for $40 million. Easily, Brainthwaite and Todibo could totally revitalize the back line with the departures that are expected to happen as well as needing to happen in the future. At center back, you could see Rafael Varane depart. We know that. You could see Harry Maguire be sold. If both of those things happen, you need two center backs, and you need two really good ones. I understand, we'll talk about Brainthwaite a little more specifically in a minute. I understand that people ask, well, left-footed. The thing is, it's kind of a funny thing because many teams play with two right-footed center backs, and including, Real Madrid winning tons of Champions Leagues with Rafael Varane and Sergio Ramos together. It's like best case scenario, you have a left foot and a right foot, but two rights is the same as two lefts. There's no difference really. It's just more rare because left-footed players and left-handed and left-footed people in general are a bit less common in many ways. But there's really no difference between two left-footed center backs. So I think that sometimes people will think that, a Brainthwaite means he's rotation with Lisandro Martinez, but that's not how I see it. How I see it is the way that they would like to have it is they'd like to have at least three top-level center backs that they can rotate through, move around, and give them flexibility in many different ways. They cannot play all 60 games. There's too many injuries. You want depth, you want changes, you want flexibility, you want angles, you want, the ability to do different things. So it's not really like that. And so I think they would love to have a situation where they have Lisandro Martinez, Gerard Brainthwaite, and Todibo as their main center backs, and then have some depth, players who aren't expecting to start, some, Kambuala's young players coming through in there. And then I have Scalvini as a backup for Todibo. But I do think in an ideal world, they will have two starting, they would sign two center backs with two center backs departing. Two starting level ones, and don't worry about the depth, just get the best players available. And I think in some respect, there's obviously matching and building a team, but sometimes I think it gets too caught up in that instead of just getting, the best player available for certain, um, especially when you're talking about young players who can work into any team, get the best athletes on the pitch. And that's something United are lacking is that physical floor of getting the best athletes. When you look at like Arsenal and what they're doing, and right now what they've really done is they've raised the physical floor of their team massively, and it's paying dividends. And City have always done it. Liverpool have done it. The best teams do that, and it's obviously you don't want just physical players, but you want the best athletes. If you have the best athletes, you have the best chance to win. That's a lot of the basics of building a good team, especially with young players. So there's a lot there. I think in fullback, it's still in question what's going to happen there. There was some interesting links that came out since the last video to a Faye in, he's left center back, left back kind of player. I don't really know in this case with Balde or Kyle Walker-Peters, who I have on here, whether they're even realistic at all right now. They're just players that there's been interest in. I don't have anything solid in terms of who might be assigning there. Schulte at goalkeeper, there's definitely potential that Baindir could leave, or that there could be a shakeup in the goalkeeper area this summer. And he is a player that they've been looking at. There was some good reports on that last week before I made that video, and I understand those are accurate. In the midfield, the two main names that I'm keeping an eye on are Hillman and Amadou Onana. Now, there's two other names that are relevant, okay, which is João Neves and João Gomez. And as I understand it, they're viewed as the same profile of player. The question is, one, this is of course related to Casemiro's departure. That's what this is all about, is about if Casemiro leaves, you need someone to replace him. Kobbie Mainoo only came back into the team right around not that long ago from injury. They've been preparing for a whole year and longer in terms of midfield and profiles and all of that. I think there's a real question to be asked of whether, João Gomez or João Neves with Kobbie Mainoo is physical enough for the Premier League as a partnership. If they were coming in next to a Casemiro or with Bruno or, in a different setup, maybe they would be. I think that Hillman, I'm just going to get it wrong, it doesn't matter, and Amadou Onana are better matches. And I think they're viewed as, I don't know this for a fact, but I do know that they're different profiles. And Onana and Hillman are definitely more physical players. And they like literally physical in terms of size and all of that, and height, which does matter. So I'm not positive on how this is going to work, but I think they're maybe more likely than that profile of Gomez or Neves. I could be wrong on that. That may change as we get closer to summer. You could end up with two, right? I could definitely see a world where if Casemiro leaves, if Eriksen leaves, and then a good offer comes in for Scott, I'm not saying he will be sold, but if a good offer comes in and you've already got your midfielder in, then an opportunity for somebody like, Gomez comes up to say, well, yeah, what if we got Amadou Onana and João Gomez in? Well, now we've got a midfield. Amadou Onana, Gomez, Mainoo, Bruno, Mount. You've got a really solid unit there of players. So this is probably a little bit in flux and is, of course, going to depend on Casemiro and further outs. But I would suspect that, they when you look at top teams, you want a big player, and I mean physically large-ish player, and imposing to be in your midfield. The best teams have them: Arsenal, Declan Rice, and obviously they had Fabinho for a long time for Liverpool, Rodri, Fernandinho. These are players who are very, very physical to back up that midfield. So I think that they're going to want that if Casemiro's to depart. You're going to need to replace his physicality and ability to cover ground. In the front line, I would definitely keep an eye on Benjamin Šeško. Now, a link came out to Joselu, right? Obviously, Madrid's backup striker, played in the Premier League before. Not setting the world alive, but I could see a signing like that. That's like a Cavani. I'm not saying he's as good as Cavani was, because he's not. But I could see a signing like that at striker. Someone who can back him up that's not going to play every game. And that's an interesting link. So I'm definitely keeping an eye on that. I do think Šeško's of interest. I would keep an eye on that one too. If we pursue a right winger, which I do think we will, I know they've been looking at it, but it is going to be somewhat contingent on 3 players, right? 3 players who can play on the right that their futures still need clarification. And so it may not be immediate. When you see a lot of media reports about that are not mentioning the right winger, of course, it's because it's a bit contingent on these. That doesn't mean they're not looking, that they're not keeping an eye on it, and that they've not made contacts or had discussions with and about right-wing players, with the first choice being, as I see it, Michael Olise. But you have 3 players' futures that are still in question. Jadon Sancho, who Dortmund will try to buy, and that it's likely will leave, potentially on another loan, maybe with an option or an obligation for 20-30 million. They want to offer Daniel Malen. We talked about that. That's something the club are not interested in, but Ten Hag might be. And same with the striker situation. Again, I went through the whole list in that video, so I don't want to recover it, but Brian Brobby, a name at striker that Ten Hag likes, but there's nothing happening with that. It's just a name he likes. Yeah, but a right winger, Jadon Sancho, that situation has to be resolved. Antony, that situation has to be resolved, because there's a good chance, especially if there is a change at manager this summer, that Antony is not going to be someone viewed as a player for United for the future. Just the fact of it, he's living on Ten Hag being here at the moment, and I'm not trying to be insulting, but a good cameo against Liverpool is not going to convince. He'd have to have a very good end of season to change hearts and minds. If he did, then it would reduce the potential for buying a right winger. Absolutely. But some about his future has to be figured out too, and what could happen there. And then Mason Greenwood is the other one, and that maybe covers the striker situation too. Is it more likely that Mason Greenwood leaves? I think so. But at the moment, there's no offers for him at a suitable price point. I honestly am not sure it's a situation where they're just going to sell him at any cost. I think if they don't get a suitable value, that he could return. I think. That is my opinion. Just based on observing how it's going so far. But they'll need more suitable offers for that. So those are 3 situations that will affect that front line pretty drastically in terms of signings. And that's why none of this is settled yet. How the rest of the season turns out is going to affect not the names that they're looking at, because you always need to be prepared and have your contingency plans and have your lists and have the players drawn up and start making contacts, which they are. But the priorities will shift based on departures, performance of the rest of the season, and a few other factors as well as the manager. So that's kind of a summary of where it is at this point in time, that I would say. So on Gerard Brainthwaite, obviously, I've been talking about a lot, and in recent videos I mentioned that United had made contact with people around him to assess and gauge his interest and to start kind of lining this one up. You got a first very, very strong article from the Telegraph yesterday. I say strong because it's a high tier, and when they start talking about that, then it's legitimate and that it's something that's acceptable to be out there. So Brainthwaite, it's I really think it's quite plausible that this is something that's going to happen, simply because he's viewed as an incredible player, extremely high rated, one of the best talents available for the future on the market in terms of center backs, and they need that. They need young center backs. I mean, we just do. We're in the end going to have to replace practically everybody pretty soon. And, we need a lot of them for the reasons we discussed before, but that's progressing nicely, and I'm pretty happy with that. On the director front, obviously, as I had heard it, they were going to be working on the Dan Ashworth deal and other aspects during this break. They are, it's not done. And I don't have this extremely concretely, but I think there might be some alternative plans. Not to say that we're not getting Dan Ashworth. I really don't want that to be taken that way, because it's not what I'm saying in the slightest. It remains a when factor with him. But I believe they might be working on some alternative kind of strategies that may give them more immediate things that they need to continue things moving forward, even if it continues to take more time to bring him in. And at the same time, this, sweats Newcastle a bit in the talks and negotiations, because they're being definitely difficult. So I don't know exactly what that entailed, but I would think of it kind of like the way it was expressed to me. Maybe I think of it like getting a more experienced person in like the recruitment area in the meantime than what they might have been planning for before, or a little bit of a broader scope individual there. How does that work in the future? I'm not sure. Maybe it's still fine, but they think with all of this stuff. They have these plans. They have contingencies. They're thinkers, and they always have contingency plans. So I think there's things that they're working on at the same time. Maybe it's just part of bargaining and negotiations with Newcastle to do that. They're not like leaving Dan Ashworth out to high and dry. He's gonna get the job. It is just a when factor. Like literally, when can he start, and how do we get that agreed? But in the meantime, things have to happen, and they're working on that. I really want to talk about this head coach thing a little bit, because there's a lot of interesting stories out there. Obviously, you've seen a whole lot of stuff about Southgate, Gary O'Neill. I mean, it's mostly all coming from the same place, but from all sorts of different areas, about coaches, about managers, about all of it. One of the things that I've really maintained for a really long time, and I almost cannot be more explicit about this and emphatic about this point. When people say, because they want to, obviously I get a lot of questions about the manager's future, about Ten Hag, all of that, and I've really tried avoiding getting into too much discussion on it, in terms of details about, is he going to stay, is he going to go, and speculating there, and I don't want things to be taken the wrong way either. But the biggest factor is not the Champions League. The biggest factor is not the FA Cup. The biggest factor is and always has been the acceptance of a more limited scope of job. That has always, always, always been the biggest factor. Because when you say, give him a chance at what? Give him a chance to do what? Give him a season under a proper structure. What does that mean? Well, it includes him. If he's going to be in the job, that proper structure includes him. It's not do the same thing you're doing, but under the same structure. Sorry, that's not changing anything. Ten Hag is a part of the failing structure. The reason that things haven't worked. People don't want to hear that, but it's a fact. Sir Alex Ferguson is a part of the bad structure. But he was all-encompassing enough and so good to squeeze out what he could out of it. But the problems with recruitment, with refreshing the squad, had been starting years earlier, before he retired. Obviously, all under the Glazers not setting this all up properly. So it's not Ten Hag get a chance. It's accept and be a part of the new structure. It's not getting a chance under the new structure. His job changing is a part of that new structure. There is no new structure without that job changing. The manager cannot be overseeing transfers in a new structure, or there's no new structure. The manager cannot be setting all the fitness regimens under a new structure, or it's not a new structure. You see? So the biggest factor in his future is, will he work within and as a part of that new structure, including having his role and job focused as a head coach? And what could that also include? A performance director who oversees the coaching, who aligns the coaches and ensures that it's all being done in the manner that United want from top to bottom. Coaches who are not a part of the manager's staff, more of those coaches who are part of the club staff, appointed by the club to come in and be a part of the staff that may survive and last beyond a manager, which isn't that unusual. And the head coach being the guy who coaches and focuses on coaching, the training ground, literally the training ground and match days. And that's what they do. And that's what their scope of their role is. And obviously they're coordinating. Every single head coach, every single manager coordinates with recruitment in terms of giving feedback. This is where we're weak. This is where our players aren't performing. This is where we have needs, and aligns with them. But it is a different role. And there's been quite a few articles that have been coming out that have continued to push the scope of this. And that's the biggest factor, because it will not be acceptable. There is no change without this changing. There is no new structure without this changing. That's just a fact. There is no new structure without this role of manager changing. So that's the biggest factor with Ten Hag and accepting that and working within that moving forward. And that's the biggest factor with how things might be structured in the future. And so, yeah, there might be truth in United talking to other coaches. And it may have nothing to do with the manager. It could be for this manager, it could be for a different manager, it could be for any manager, that they want to have their own coaches who are responsible for certain things. So there could be some truth kind of behind these other aspects. And it's just really important I just think it's important that that's understood. That is a part of this restructure. So, yeah, that's all I really have to say about that. Now, if Ten Hag is willing to work within that structure and has a great end of the season, that might be the decision that's made. Like, a decision that is made can be still contingent when you have people who are logical and have different plans. A good decision might be if the manager will accept this changing role and accomplish these things, then he could be in the job and work with us for the future. But it's at the very minimum, it's going to have to be that, and it really goes nowhere without an acceptance of that restructuring. And that's going to be up to Ten Hag too, whether he wants to do that and where he sees himself in that job, and whether it's a role that he wants. And I understand that people will generally say, well, that's exactly what he had at Ajax. No, it's not. And I think that probably there's more research that should be done, because it's disingenuous. Erik Ten Hag, even before he got the Ajax job, asked for additional control over certain things. And through the years, he pushed for more control at Ajax and had the ability to bring in signings of his own. And you can go and do some research on that. But people are funny. You don't know whether he's going to accept it or not. You can't make that claim. If somebody feels like something is a demotion, even if it's logical, maybe they don't want to accept it. Maybe they do. It's not for anybody to say except in the conversations that they have. But a lot of assumptions get made that aren't necessarily based in fact. So we'll see. We will see what happens. We will see what happens with that. But I really like to discuss that, because either way, Ten Hag, somebody else, doesn't matter. That's the job moving forward. It's a much more limited scope role. And the idea is that it has continuity. It has continuity. If it doesn't work out with one manager, they can go to the next one. And without it being a complete overhaul of everything. So just bear that in mind. That I think is just an important thing. And beyond that, you can speculate all you want about the futures of Ten Hag or this or that, and it's all going to be speculation until something is settled in terms of the season, and then we'll get the answers we want. In terms of injuries, there's a few more. Marcus Rashford has an injury that he picked up at Forest. Not the only one. And when you come into the end of March and this time of year, it's really common that a lot of your main starting players are carrying knocks. You know, you saw Harry Maguire depart from England with a small knock. You saw how many players departing. This time of year, everybody's carrying a little injury. Yeah, ideally, not that it can happen outside the FA Cup, right? But ideally, we don't have any more 130-minute games because that's takes a toll on them. But hopefully, a decent rest. There's stories. Garnacho doing a lot of extra work with his own fitness people to keep himself recovering well from the games and everything like that too. And we don't know, but we should have Lissandro Martinez, Varane, Dalot, Wan-Bissaka, which should be the starting back four after the break and hopefully through the end of the year, with Maguire perhaps, getting in there at times. We should have Kobbie Mainoo. There's not a lot. We haven't really heard much about Casemiro since the little thing. It supposedly was a little thing, but so I guess we don't know whether he's fit yet. So Kobbie Mainoo, and it'll be Mount is back. How does he factor into this now? That's going to be a really interesting question now that he's returned from injury, how he factors into this team. I'm really curious to see how he plays. Does he play? Or does it continue to be Casemiro, Mainoo, Bruno, you'd think? Or is it Scott, Mainoo, and Bruno if Casemiro's injured? I don't know. Really hard to say how Mount factors into this now, but I think we're going to learn about how he could be used over the next few games. And then the front line, I'm sure we'll see Rasmus Højlund, Rashford, and Garnacho every game starting. The question will be now with Ahmad having his moment and Anthony scoring a goal. I don't think either of them are going to start anytime soon, frankly, because the front three that's there has been working to win games. But obviously, for both of them, when you factor in the future and summer as well, if they're making appearances moving forward, they're going to have to grab them with both hands. Because I don't think either of them have done enough to say that, not necessarily by fault of their own in Ahmad's case, but have done enough to say that, they'll for sure be a fixture in the team moving forward. We're going to need to see more than one game to do that. But a lot of players back from injury now. A lot of interesting questions will be answered with a more full squad. And so I think it's going to start to get really interesting now. And we can't afford to lose games to stay in the into the hunt for Champions League, which fifth should do it. So, okay, I think I've got through everything. I think that's all I can manage for today. So once again, thank you for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn notifications on. Use the link in the description below to download our sponsor SofaScore or the little QR code. Got it to that side. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Oh, and as a final note, a few new videos. Tomorrow I'm going to be doing another tactics video with Darnish, and then we have a really special video coming out not from me, but on our channel that is from somebody in our community who's helped me with the community a long time, and who has some really important and special guests that they interviewed that did this in England, filmed this in England, and has to do with United and the stadium and all of that. So keep an eye out for that, because I really implore you to watch it. I think it's going to be awesome, and he put an incredibly amount of work and professionalism into this, and it's going to be on our channel, and it's awesome. Please watch that when it comes out, and I think you'll find it very interesting. Thank you. Speak to you later.